Anyway, I remember having a wicked crush on my 3rd grade teacher. Now, that didn't make me like school any better, but it sure did make me like her. I also had wicked crushes on my babysitters. And when they would be on the phone for, hours talking to their boyfriends when they were supposed to be watching me, I would get into all kinds of shenanigans just to get their attention. One time I even cracked my head on the corner of a coffee table. Not intentionally, I was just showing off to get my babysitter's attention, and it cracked my head and it was not good. So I would go to all lengths just to get somebody that I had a crush on to get their attention. You're listening to Midlife Strategies for Badass Women, the no BS podcast for women over 40 who are sick of playing by someone else's rules. I'm your host, Sue Willoughby, badass midlife strategist, truth teller, and professional fire starter for midlife reinvention. Around here, we don't do fluff. We do real talk, bold strategies, and badass breakthroughs. Because midlife isn't a crisis, it's your damn power move. If you're all in, unapologetic, and ready to reinvent, let's get started. Hey, badass listeners, welcome to the Pride edition of Midlife Strategies for Badass Women. Here's the scoop. I invited people to share their coming out stories, and no one responded. Well, first of all, it's not too late to come out. And secondly, it's not too late to share your coming out story with me on the air on the show. So for the rest of the month, if you want to either submit your coming out story to me, you can DM me on Instagram or you can email me directly and say, hey, I want to share my coming out story. Probably DMing me on Instagram is going to be your quickest response time. And I will either interview you on the show, or you can just submit your story either in written format or in recorded format and then just upload it. Okay, more on that later. I will put some links in the show notes, but I would love to hear your coming out stories because everyone's coming out story is unique to them and to their situation. And I'm going to share my coming out story today on the episode. And then you can say, oh, that's not so bad. That's not so scary. Oh, maybe I'll share mine as well. Okay, now that we've gotten that out of the way, it's Pride Month, all of June, and I am here to support the community in any way that I can. And because, we're under attack right now by who. He who shall not be named. And I'm not talking about Voldemort, because I will say Voldemort all day long. Anyway, back to the show. So I'm going to share my coming out story. It was a while ago. I was an early bloomer, and it's kind of funny because I think about, for those of you out there, you have a coming out story when you actually told other people that you were queer. But I want to know, when did you know, like in your heart and in your being, when you knew you were queer? Because I knew really early on. I can remember having a wicked crush on my 3rd grade teacher. She was a young, very attractive. Okay, we're talking about like this is a long time ago. But she was young and very attractive. Anyway, I remember having a wicked crush on my 3rd grade teacher. Now, that didn't make me like school any better, but it sure did make me like her. I also had wicked crushes on my babysitters. And when they would be on the phone for, hours talking to their boyfriends when they were supposed to be watching me, I would get into all kinds of shenanigans just to get their attention. One time I even cracked my head on the corner of a coffee table. Not intentionally, I was just showing off to get my babysitter's attention, and it cracked my head and it was not good. So I would go to all lengths just to get somebody that I had a crush on to get their attention. Anyway, back to the story. So I knew early on that I liked girls. And that did not stop me from, trying to be, I don't know what you want to call it, straight or whatever, dating boys because that was the norm. And usually the guys that I dated, especially in high school, were guys that had cool cars or motorcycles or something like that, that they had something cool that I wanted to have. Now, I had my share of cool cars, but that that was my main motive. I'm like, "Oh, you got a cool car? Okay, I'll go out with you." So back to the coming out story. Now, as I mentioned, I knew I was queer. So this is the 70s, folks. This is not like yesterday or last week or 5 years ago. This is the 70s. So there was no Instagram, there was no TikTok, there was no online dating apps. So when I finally decided that I wanted to take action on this and actually try and figure out how to meet other queer people, I decided to take out an advertisement, right? Like in the classifieds. So we had a local paper, which was, an alternative newspaper, and it had a personal section. Now, for those of you who are of a certain age, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And they had a section for women seeking women. Now, mind you, I was like 16 at the time, I think. And I composed a written ad and sent it in to the newspaper and had it published. Now, back then, we didn't have cell phones. Like I said, this was the freaking dark ages, y'all. This was old school with a capital SKOOL, old school. So I put my personal ad in and I received, you had to get a P.O. box. And so I got a P.O. box. Now, I didn't tell anybody else that I was doing this. This was fully on me because I knew I had to do something about it. I'm like, how the hell am I going to meet other queer people? It's like, what am I going to do? Walk up to them? I don't think my gaydar was fully developed at the time. So I put the ad in the paper and I waited patiently for someone to send me a letter. And I did get a letter or two or three or whatever. And these are like handwritten letters with actual photographs, like usually Polaroids. But that was how we rolled back then. So I answered back, wrote a letter back. This was like, I'm serious. This was like Pony Express. So there was no instant gratification here. I actually went to meet someone who had written me a letter, and it was the most fucking awkward thing. I mean, if you think that online dating is awkward, this was 100 times more awkward. So I met this person and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I did know that I was not attracted to them when I saw them in person. But it was a start. So it's like baby steps. These are some serious training wheels that I put on. Meanwhile, I'm still in high school. I'm, 16, 17, whatever it was. And the high school that I belonged to, we had sororities and fraternities, which is weird. Basically, it was an excuse for 17-year-olds to get drunk and have a party. So a friend of mine pledged me for this sorority, and I got in. I don't think they wanted me because I was a little different than all the other girly girls, but I got in, and now I'm a member of the sorority. And then I had to pledge people. So there's a lot of information here, so please hang in there. The other thing is I was always tall. I'm 5'10", and they wanted me to play sports. And I was not sporty spice at all. I was party spice. So they wanted me to play basketball. And I can remember going to a couple of basketball rehearsals, practices, I guess they call them. And we were running around the gym, like, in circles. Why? I don't know. That was the stupidest thing of life. And with every lap of the gym that we would do, I would, like, stop at the drinking fountain because I was parched. And, of course, the coach kept yelling at me. Here's the thing. Okay. I quit high school twice. The first time I quit is just because I hated it and I couldn't stand it and I just didn't want to be there. I went back in my senior year and then I found out that I needed like 4 credits in gym. And I was like, hell to the no, I'm quitting again. So I quit high school twice. Okay, so now that's out of the way. But anyway, there's this weird time where I was trying out for sports. They wanted me on the crew team because of my size. They wanted me to play basketball because of my size. They didn't care really that I had no athletic abilities at the time. And when I was doing this basketball thing, I noticed that there was this really cute girl that I had a really big crush on. And so the only thing I could think of to do was to pledge her for the sorority. And of course, on pledge night, everybody gets ridiculously drunk. And she ended up getting ridiculously drunk and vomiting on the side of my car on the way home. So she ended up coming to my house and staying over. And that was my first girlfriend. But that's not when I came out. I had already come out. And I came out to my mom. So I told my mom, I remember it very distinctly. We were in the kitchen of this house that we were renting. And I was cutting her hair because I fancied myself a beauty school dropout. More on that later. And and I said, "Hey, Mom, I have something to tell you." And I said, "I'm queer. I'm a lesbian. I'm gay. I'm whatever word I used at the time." And then I just didn't say anything else. And she said, "Well, I already knew that." I said, "Oh, big surprise there. Okay." So that was uneventful. And then she said, "Are you ready for this? I have something to tell you." And I'm like rolling my eyes going, "Okay, here it comes." She said, "I'm queer too." And I said, "I know." She said, "How do you know?" I said, "Are you shitting me with this? Because we have been spending the last, I don't know how many years with your, air quote, best friend and her kids on vacation. And you guys always slept in the same bed. And it was always a little weird and a little awkward." So anyway, it was this weird mutual coming out between myself and my mother. Okay, I'm going to stop right there because I know that some of you have had difficult coming out stories, especially with your parents, right? Well, of course, that it did not go well, that your parents lost their shit and maybe they kicked you out of the house. So you're probably thinking, wow, that is really cool. Your mother was gay, and so that was a really easy entry. Okay, maybe so. I will give you that. However, can I just say that I went on to work in a lot of queer bars because I figured, okay, now that I'm out, whatever, as soon as I turned 18, I was looking for places to meet people. And where else are you going to meet women but in gay bars? And then I didn't want to just hang out in them. I'm like, well, if I'm working in the gay bar, whether it's bartending or DJing or doing whatever, which I did all of those things, especially the whatever, then I'm going to meet a lot more people. And that's what I did. So here's the scenario. I'm working at a gay bar, trying to be cool, trying to meet women. And who hangs out at the bar? Ready? I give you 5 guesses and the first 4 don't count. My mother. My mother would come and hang out at the bars. Oh my God, that was so embarrassing. I mean, when you get to be a certain age, first of all, you don't wanna hang out with your parents, especially when you're a certain age and you're queer. I don't care. Everybody thought my mother was, like, so cool. Maybe to them it was cool. To me, it was fucking mortifying. Let me tell you. I can't even. That's all I'm gonna say is I can't even. Now, if you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you'll also know that my mother was an alcoholic. So there's that to add, I will say, insult to injury. Yeah, so okay. So I had my first girlfriend when I was 17 because she threw up on the side of my car. That wasn't the only reason. And I fell madly in love. We had a very steamy relationship, as only 17-year-olds can have. But that was like young love. And my first experience is like, okay, that was intense. How do I replicate that? And anyway, it was my first relationship was very, very, very intense. And it held me captive for a very long time. Okay, I have another mom story. So my mother thought it was cool I remember one time we went to a women's music concert. Now, women's music today is a little different than it was back then. I'm not talking Brandy Carlisle here. I'm talking like Meg Christian and all the old school lesbian musicians, right? Women's music. So we went, and I went with my mom. And I remember we went up to get our tickets, which was really funny. We got our tickets, and the gal that handed us our tickets said, "All right, you girls, have a good time tonight." And I looked at my mother, and I'm like, oh, hell no. She thinks we're together. I made it very clear to this woman. I'm like, this is my mother, not my partner. Okay, so let's just get that queer. Okay, so that was a mom story. I have a lot of mom stories, actually. Queer mom stories. Let me see if I can dig up another one out of the archives. Oh, okay. So shortly after coming out to my mom at a tender age, I was still not of legal drinking age. And back then it was 18. So I was 17. And she would take me to bars. And there was this one specific bar that we would go to with our queer boyfriends, her queer boyfriends, in New Haven, Connecticut. And it was a gay boy bar. And it was called the Neutered Rooster. And it was a disco. I'm talking polyester shirts, bell bottoms, and a whole lot of KC and the Sunshine Band. Anyway, seriously, I used to go to the gay bars with my mother. Oh boy. So I think, as I think back, my coming out was really padded, very nice and smooth. I didn't have to worry about my mother kicking me out. I didn't have to worry about any of that weirdness or trouble that a lot of young queer people have to put up with. And I'm not talking about now. I mean, I'm talking about now. It's difficult to come out. It's difficult to come out to your friends. It's difficult to come out to your parents because there's still a lot of fear and anxiety and, let's face it, hatred for queer people and trans people. And whatever it is, we're not welcome still. I've lived my life as an openly gay woman let's see, if I came out when I was 17, so for the past 50 years. And I feel like I am very grateful that it has been, not totally uneventful, but for the most part, I've never had to hide. I've always been, like I said, open and just been able to be myself. So for all of that, I am extremely grateful. And for those of you who had a rough coming out and who are still struggling. I know it's cliche, but it does get better. Find your tribe. Find the people that will support you. If it's not your family, find your friends. Find those people that will be with you and around you and prop you up and not drag you down, because that is so, so important now more than ever. Like I said, I came out in the 70s when it was not totally cool, but in some ways I was insulated by the fact that my mother was queer. Now, let me just say one thing. My mother was always closeted. She didn't want people to know. Now, she had a partner for a very, very, very long time, and she would always talk about her partner as her roommate. So, that in and of itself was sad. But they had their life, and that was a beautiful thing for them. So I applaud that. And whatever it takes, right? Anyway, I would really love to hear from those of you who would be willing to share your coming out stories. And I'm very serious about that. I've got a ton of stories. Actually, I don't know how the hell I made it to 67, to be honest. I was crazy. I was a crazy young person, and I had a lot of issues. I didn't come to my senses until probably in my mid to late 50s. So there is hope for you. If you're coming out later in life, congratulations. I know a lot of women and men who went the traditional route and lived that life and had families and had children and got married because they didn't know any other way. And sometimes you have to do what you have to do. And if you have to do those things, do them. But do your heart a solid. Be your authentic self. So if you're coming out late in life, I applaud you. Better late than never. Come out, be happy, be queer, surround yourself with people who love you and care about you, and tell everybody else to go fuck themselves. On that note, I'm going to wish you a happy Pride Month. And thank you so much for listening to the show, sharing it with a friend. Reach out to me, DM me if this show has resonated with you in any way, shape, or form. And I look forward to seeing you next week on Midlife Strategies for Badass Women, hopefully with some more coming out stories. All right, my friend, be well, be queer, be yourself, and I'll see you next week.